honored that you're here tonight. Seriously, it's been a long few years, and inshallah, whatever you experienced in the last 3 years, you're healing and you're stronger for it. And inshallah, I'd like to thank the leadership of the Sundance Institute for their support of our work throughout the years. I know the last year has not been an eventful one, and we collectively got through a lot. A special thank you to Joanna Vicente. Please give them a round of applause here. Michelle Satter, Kim Utani, Mary Sadeghi, Amber Espinoza-Jones. Thank you for listening and engaging in very difficult conversations. And thank you to the entire team of the Sundance Film Festival. You all rise to the occasion this year, and of all the years that MPAC has been at Sundance, and this is our 8th year, this has been the most special. I don't even know how to express it, so thank you so much. We're having a great time. I'd like to thank the volunteers. Please give them a round of applause. They're the ones making the trains run on time, and they're just amazing. You know, when organizations host events like this, whether it's a panel or a party, every organization is assigned a team. And every year we are assigned the solid gold team. And this year there's been no exception. I want to thank the past teams if they're here, but I want to also give a shout out to this year's team. And I'm going to name them by name because they deserve the recognition for sure. Doug Flint. Okay. Mike McCrane, Kelly Call, and Elizabeth Jones. Thank you so much. And thank you to Lux Catering for taking care of us and for the delicious food. So please eat, please do consume the food because we paid a lot for it. Seriously, for those of you who don't know MPAC, we are a public policy advocacy organization. We work at the intersection of public policy and entertainment. And our entertainment industry, we began our entertainment work 30 years ago with the founding of the Media Awards. The MPAC Hollywood Bureau works within the industry to change the narrative around Islam and Muslims. And while we're not a religious organization, we work very hard to protect the image of the faith and its followers by doing 3 main things. We consult on TV and film projects, we connect the Muslim talent to industry decision makers, and we contribute our thought leadership through organizing these panels and discussions. For more information on MPAC, please visit our website, mpachollywoodbureau.org. So whether you are a screenwriter, director, producer, editor, all of the above, or anything else, no matter how hard we work as an advocacy organization, you are doing the heavy lifting. And you are on the front lines. Your stories not only matter, they're vital for future generations. Please don't deprive the world of your stories. Keep pushing, keep shining. On behalf of MPAC and the kid that immigrated to America 5 decades ago who couldn't see herself on TV, didn't see herself on TV and film, thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing the heavy lifting. Thank you so much. So please give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you. So now I want to ask Razi, Evelyn, and Omar Noureldin to come on stage for the first panel. So just to couch the conversation, we have a lot of work ahead of us. Things are feeling good, but there's so much work to do. You feel the stories that include Muslim characters and storylines are increasing, and this year's festival is actually no exception. Every section in this year's festival has Muslim artists and/or films. And Nida Mansour is here, and Qasim. Yeah. Oh, did you want to eat? Is that what it was? Sorry. And Qasim is coming later, and there's so many other people who have films here and projects. So congratulations to all of you. Give them a hand. Okay, so let me now just shift and turn to the panel here. The conversation we're about to have will center around Dr. Evelyn Alsultany's book, Broken: The Failed Promise of Muslim Inclusion. And the panelists will question whether or not this expansion of Muslim narratives is a result of crisis. And if not, then how do we keep the movement and the momentum going? Our moderator for this panel is Razi Jafri, who doesn't really need an introduction. He's a big part of everyone's lives. Razi is a talented and thoughtful documentary filmmaker. He's a Sundance Producing Lab Fellow. We met a few years ago when he was working on a short doc called Muslims in the Military, and now it's a feature documentary. So give him a hand. Dr. Evelyn Alsultany is a professor at USC, a scholar and an author. Her book will be sold here tonight in the very back. A few years ago, she and I created the Obaidi Alsultany test, narrative test, which we'll touch upon later in the discussion. And Omar Noureldin, who is a lawyer, DE&I advisor, and MPAC board ex officio. He's one of my dearest friends. He was also the vice president of MPAC. When he told me he was coming to the party, I was like, why waste Omar's sighting? And so I asked him to replace me on the panel. And so I'm going to hand it off to you, Razi, and we are 1 minute behind schedule.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. So the conversation tonight is centered around Evelyn's book. And so as a way of maybe introducing some of the concepts for those of you that are not familiar with the book, I just wanted to maybe have Evelyn kind of give a little bit of an overview of the book, what brought you to this topic, and maybe just give us some of the main concepts that are covered.
Thank you, Razi. It's so great to be here. I want to start by thanking Sue Obaidi for inviting me to be part of this panel. I've had the honor of working with her over the last few years, and I admire her so much and all of her energy. And I also want to thank Omar and Razi for being willing to be in conversation with me tonight. And Dolly's Bookstore is here. They're an independent bookstore in Park City, and they are in the back selling my book. So thank you, Dolly. So to begin with what brought me to the book, I was born and raised in New York in the 1970s to an Arab Muslim dad, a Latina Catholic mom, and I grew up with very little representation. I grew up watching Raiders of the Lost Ark and Jewel of the Nile and these kinds of movies. Ricky Ricardo was the closest thing I had as someone who's also Cuban. It actually meant something to me. Later on, when I learned that Wonder Woman Linda Carter was Latina, I couldn't believe it. But I grew up with all these stereotypes and watching my family maneuver them on a daily basis. And later, when I went to college, I really wanted to understand my experiences as a Muslim in the United States. And to learn about Islam, you went to Islamic studies, but I wanted to go to ethnic studies. I wanted to learn about the experiences of Muslims racially in the United States. And so over the last few years, I've been observing some changes and tracking trends. In my research, I study representations of Arabs and Muslims in the media. And I was noticing over the last 10 years or so that Muslims have come to be included in conversations about diversity. For a very long time, we were not included. To be included, we would either talk about racial groups, and Muslims are not a race. So we wouldn't talk about religion when talking about questions of diversity. And so I started trying to figure out what was happening. And so the book is about how Muslims come to be included in diversity politics in the United States. And they have come to be included through a series of crises that have come to be recognized by the public as acknowledging that Islamophobia is a problem. So Islamophobia is a very long-standing problem. Some say it started in the 7th century with the beginning of Islam, but we've only started using the term Islamophobia in the early 2010s in the United States. So we've only come to recognize it as a problem recently, and through that recognition, and with Black Lives Matter happening and the Me Too movement and other social movements, Islamophobia has also come to be recognized as a problem, and Muslims have started to become included. My main argument is that Muslims come to be included, and this applies to other groups too, but my book is about Muslims, through what I term crisis diversity. Crisis diversity is the idea that there's an event that takes place that draws people's attention and galvanizes action. So we can take the Muslim ban as an example. And then corporations issue statements. Universities issue diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives to include Muslims. Hollywood starts making representations of Muslims outside of the context of terrorism. And then the crisis moment passes, attention wanes, and we stop paying attention to the issue until the next crisis emerges. So my book is concerned about what kind of outcome do we have with diversity if we are only looking at the crisis moment and not necessarily looking at the root causes.
Wonderful, and we'll get a bit more into it in just a moment. And Omar, I wanted to invite you into the conversation as well. And how did you come to this work, this DI work that you're doing?
Well, is this working? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it started with MPAC, actually. So I grew up within the larger MPAC family, and the work that it does to kind of create better representations of Muslims, both in media and entertainment, news media and entertainment, and then give Muslims a seat at the table at places of decision, whether it's in Washington, D.C. or at in corporate America. So that was my entry point. Now, specifically with entertainment media and the Hollywood Bureau working with Sue, well, we all work for Sue, right? But working with Sue in this work kind of gave me an entry point to what it looks like behind the scenes, right? Like, what are those conversations happening within movie studios, TV networks, and when these crises happen, how they want to respond to them. And currently in my work as a DEI advisor and kind of racial justice, social justice advisor, I work across, a lot of different industries, but specifically what you see in the media industry that translate is what I call performative diversity, right? So when you have these moments of crisis diversity, it leads to performative diversity, which is, all right, we have the crisis, how do we make the Muslims happy, right? Or the Muslims and their allies happy. So let's ask Omar or Evelyn or Razi to come and talk about something to our company, to our production company, to our TV network, and have them give a talk so that we can say, look, we're doing something about this issue. But as the crisis, as Evelyn said, passes, they're not invited to come back for a follow-up, right? Lots of great ideas are discussed at these roundtable meetings that happen after a crisis. And then there's no follow-up when, Sue or myself or someone will say, hey, we had talked about 5 different initiatives at this roundtable about how to create better representations of Muslims in media. And then you send the follow-up emails. We actually want to start getting to work on it. Your emails don't get answered, right? So that's what I think is this parallel between the crisis and then is the work that's being done actually meant to create systemic change, or is it just to appease, the folks that have enough voice now to actually matter? Because right before, there were crises that happened before, but it wasn't, the Muslim contingency within entertainment media wasn't large enough where anyone cared. Now they care, but the question is, how do you start creating that systemic change?
So I want to stay on this just a little bit longer. You guys started getting into how diversity is done and how diversity training is done. What are the benefits and harms to Muslims specifically in this form of diversity training that we're seeing today?
So I would say the benefits are that we want to be seen, we want to be included, and it feels good to have recognition. I want the recognition. An Islamophobic event happens, I want the recognition. The problem comes, in my perspective, when we are only focused on the crisis. So let me think about an example. Let's take Muslim ban. Because Muslim ban led to unprecedented action. As Omar said, there have been countless crises. It's not as if Muslim ban was the first crisis that Muslim people were facing, but it was the first crisis that led to this unprecedented galvanizing action. Sue and I have had a lot of conversations that we believe it is a Trump effect, that he inspired action, he inspired mobilization because he was so overt with his racism that what happened with Trump was not possible under Obama because people were basically sleeping at the wheel that we had a black president and thinking things were so great. So we have all these changes in Hollywood. I actually have a list of shows that I've noticed have changed, and I think I saw Fawzia Mirza here, and I know she wrote a character for the Red Line. And that's one example, that we start seeing Muslim characters and contexts having nothing to do with terrorism. Nida Mansour is here And she wrote We Are Lady Parts, an incredible, incredible TV show that I love more than anything. But we have Rami, we have Mo, Ms. Marvel, Lady Parts, Sort of, Transplant, FBI, DC Legends of Tomorrow, Grey's Anatomy, threw in Dr. Kadri, Tan France on Queer Eye. We have The Bull Type. We have all these Muslim characters that didn't exist before, and shows that actually focus on Muslim characters. LL Cool J came out as Muslim on NCIS. On Love Victor, he has a friend Rahim, who's an Iranian Muslim. 911 Lone Star. Alison Abdullah on Orange is the New Black. So there are just so many, and there are others. This is just my short list so that I wouldn't forget. So lots of change. And it's remarkable, and I wish I grew up like that, but I don't know if it's going to continue. The other day I watched Jack Ryan season 3, and in the first season there is an FBI character played by Wendell Pierce. He's Muslim, and there's a terrorist Muslim, so we have this patriotic Muslim in there seemingly to balance the stereotype. And by season 3, his Muslim identity is meaningless. It's not even mentioned. But they did the work in season 1, but by season 3 it doesn't matter because there's no Muslim ban right now. So I'm concerned about how it drops out of the conversation, and we don't really focus on the root causes. My other point here is that for Hollywood to make such changes, the real crisis in Hollywood is an entire history of misrepresenting and stereotyping many different groups. That is the crisis, repairing a history of harmful representations. The Muslim ban for Hollywood, is that the crisis? The Muslim ban exposes Islamophobia, but Islamophobia is still here, whether we have the Muslim ban or not. So if I were speaking to Hollywood, I would say that the crisis needs to be looking at all of the communities that have been marginalized over 100 years of filmmaking, and what does it mean to repair that history rather than responding to specific crises and producing a few shows that, yes, feel good and are meaningful and they mean a lot to me, but in terms of long-term change, more is needed.
Yeah, and we'll get to kind of, looking ahead, what some meaningful changes might be. But Omar, I also wanted to invite you to expand on that, of what are some of the benefits and harms of the way that diversity training and these DEI programs are done today.
Yeah, I think the benefits, I think Evelyn talked about, I don't have much more to add there. I mean, the other benefit is that a community as diverse and large as the Muslim community doesn't have one story, right? There are so many different stories that can come out of Muslim communities, intersectional stories, right? Some of the characters you talked about in those shows, they're queer Muslims, they're Latino Muslims, there are, Muslims at also doctors, but also playing, different types of professions. So the more stories that are told, I think that's the better. So that's one of the benefits of looking at the diversity within the Muslim community as well. I think one of the harms or kind of pitfalls is that, and this is kind of goes to the diversity industry altogether, is that it can create its own stereotyping effects. And what I mean by that is there is a certain type of Muslim character that could be overly represented. And one of the examples that we've seen, and we're starting to see a shift from this, is the good Muslim and then the bad Muslim. So there's a number of shows, we're talking about through the late 2010s to, now in the 2020s, of if we're gonna have a Muslim terrorist, then we need the patriotic Muslim, FBI agent or counterterrorism person, or the reformed terrorist, where then that story gets being replayed and creates its own type of negative stereotyping effect. The other is that kind of looking not in the kind of substantive creative content, but in the decision making, is saying, okay, well now we know that the Muslim community in the entertainment industry has a critical mass where we need to pay attention to them, so we're gonna add them to the box of like checklists that we have to check off. So we've got for our film festival the 2 Muslim films that are going to check off that box, and there may be 5 Muslim films that would otherwise qualify based on their storytelling, their writing, their cinematography that should be included, but people start to get, the decision makers get into this narrow mindset of we have to have some, and then everyone else, we're not going to really pay attention to them because we've got are two that can satisfy the critical mass. So you start to lose some of the looking independently at the merit of what the projects are, and they just become, you know, some form of checkbox.
Yeah, one of the things that you guys are alluding to is this sort of quota system almost of checking things off the list. And one of the things that I'm sort of starting to sense is a type of insecurity amongst white institutions and structures, feeling like if, you know, maybe people are being replaced, if there's too much inclusion. And so we have to sort of keep these kind of quotas. I'm curious what your reflections on that might be, of just these institutions, which the majority of them are still white spaces, and spaces that many of us don't feel very welcome in, sometimes still to this day. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, of just like this fear and anxiety that these larger communities might have if you have too many, if you break that quota of like, oh, we have too many Muslim stories, and what are we gonna do? You know, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, I definitely think that there is this backlash against diversity right now. We are seeing that in Florida in terms of what's being taught, and it's a threat to those who want white people to remain in the same position of power that they've been in for over 400 years. So we are seeing a lot of, while there is a lot of diversity work, there's also a backlash to that diversity work that comes with the territory. And I think that backlash has a lot to do with trying to hold on to power and not wanting, you know, the whole "Make America Great Again" sentiment, wanting to maintain that.
Yeah, there's actually some social psychology research on this backlash, and some of the language that diversity programs have adopted create this backlash, specifically in kind of white-dominated institutions and places, and that's using diverse or diversity as a code word for everything that's non-white. And so when we say, hey, we need a diverse filmmaker, one filmmaker is diverse, that even just semantically, that's the wrong usage of the word. Diversity is about groups and collections, not individuals. And when you use that sort of language in pushing out diversity initiatives, it creates, in the mindset of many white people, a feeling that I lack diversity, rather than looking at diversity about a collection or a group of people. And so even some of the language that's used, and that takes us back to our kind of different types of equality models that are operating in American society. One of them is the colorblindness equality model, which race is not an issue. I don't see race, I just see people, I don't see gender. But when you're using the word like a diverse candidate, what do you actually mean? Do you mean we don't have enough black filmmakers, you know, in our slate of films, or queer filmmakers, or women? So using diverse as code for everything that is not part of white male dominant culture creates that sort of backlash, rather than being more specific about why we need more black filmmakers in our slate.
Yeah, wonderful. I wanted to actually bring in another concept in your book. It's introduced in the early chapters, but it's this, what I guess I would sort of describe as the economics of diversity through the lens of neoliberal and liberal multiculturalism. And you used a really great example of the Supreme Court, University of Michigan affirmative action case. And so I was wondering if you could sort of introduce this topic and the role of economics and capitalism in this space, and kind of help set the tone for that part of the conversation a bit.
Razi's getting real academic up here. So regarding the affirmative action case, I think it connects to what Omar was saying. There was a case where a white woman sued the University of Michigan in 2003 because she was not admitted into the law school, and she said she had a stellar GPA and that she was a victim of reverse racism. And as a result of this case, the University of Michigan, the case went to the Supreme Court, and they argued that rather than saying we need diversity to challenge a history of inequality, and we're going to use diversity to give minoritized, marginalized populations opportunities, instead they said diversity benefits everyone. Diversity leads to a better educational environment. everyone gets to learn and everyone benefits. And this is an important moment where there's a shift in how diversity is conceptualized and it emerged to replace affirmative action, because affirmative action was trying to very directly find a way to repair a history of inequality. A lot of people criticize affirmative action, it's on the decline, and so diversity is on going up to replace affirmative action. But this shift basically meant that diversity was no longer necessarily about repairing a history of inequality, but rather it was about it being good for everyone. So the new model is, and sure, it's good for everyone, but the next step is it's good for business, and there have been lots of studies that say it's profitable. You should do it because you'll make money. You should do it because your teams are better and more innovative when you have diverse groups. All of that is true and great, but then what happens to the project of rectifying 400 years of injustice? Are we still doing that? Is diversity still allowing us to actually create a more equitable society or not? So in terms of neoliberalism, which in my book, I'm looking at how corporations and other institutions have come to play a leading role in diversity, stating that diversity is a key value, and they're basically social influencers around diversity. But what happens, for example, when Hollywood is trying to think about diversity alongside profit, is that we get what I call the diversity compromise. So after the Muslim ban, Sue and I actually were having a lot of conversations where we said, hey, did you see Lone Star 911? That's amazing. They have a firefighter. She wears a hijab. She's an amazing character. But yeah, there was that episode, her hijab fell off and her hair was blowing in the wind. What are they doing? And there was case after case. Oh, did you see Aladdin? Wow, the casting is so much better. They didn't whitewash like they always do. They actually have a cast of Iranian and South Asian and Arab actors. This is amazing. But yeah, it's totally Orientalist. So it ends up being like, okay, we're gonna make this small change, but we are not gonna repair the entire thing. Orientalism, portraying the East as exotic, it still sells, it's still profitable, so we're gonna keep that, but we're gonna have better casting practices. And so it feels like this compromise, like you're one step better, but you're not there yet. And the same thing with we had many shows that we were talking about, and that's what led us to create the Obaidi Alsultany test. There are postcards actually on all of the tables. Sue and I created the Obaidi Alsultany test to help Hollywood improve representations of Muslims. We were inspired by other tests, the Duvernay test for racial representation, the Bechtel test for gender representation, the Russo test for LGBTQ representation. There's also a Riz test for Muslim representation out of the UK that highlights all the stereotypes around terrorism and oppressed veiled women. But our test is specifically, we see you trying, Hollywood, but oftentimes the efforts are falling short, and we want to try to help you get there. And a lot of those efforts falling short have to do with believing that the audience still wants a particular kind of stereotype and then making a slight tweak to make things better, and it just doesn't take us all the way.
And I'm actually looking out into the audience as people looking at the postcards of these Obaidi Alsultany tests. So maybe do you mind just walking us through some of the nuts and bolts and perhaps how a layperson could sort of use it as a filter and apply it to things that they're consuming?
Sure, so it has 5 criteria. The first is that the project that includes a Muslim character does not reproduce old tropes, but explores new stories. The idea here is, do we need another Orientalist story? Do we need a remake of Aladdin? Do we need a remake of Sinbad? Do we need to remake all of these Orientalist stories? Similarly, there have been quote unquote innovative approaches to terrorism. Jack Ryan, season 1 is one example where you get this rich backstory for the terrorist. He's not motivated by his religion or culture, but rather the US sent drone strikes and killed his family. And then he moved to France and he couldn't find a job because of racism, and all of these things happened that lead to him becoming a terrorist. So the idea here is we don't need the same old stories remade. Why not explore the incredible talent in this room and create some new stories? The second is that the project that includes Muslim characters has a Muslim identifying writer or staff from beginning to end. So rather than calling me in as a consultant at the very end where you can't even change anything anyway, why don't you have someone who is a writer, one, maybe more than one, in the room if you are producing something about a particular community, have those community members, those creatives on your team from the beginning to the end to avoid all kinds of mistakes. The third is the Muslim character is not solely defined by their religion. So in this moment of improvements, there have been characters. One that stuck out to me was Netflix's Messiah, where all of the Muslim characters were either hyper-religious or hyper-political, and all of the other characters had complex backstories and were really interesting. So there seems to be a lack of imagination around Muslims, that we're not just people, but we're really, really political and we're really, really religious. So the idea here is, you know, religion is part of your identity. It doesn't have to define every single thing like you're a robot. The fourth is the Muslim character has a strong presence in the storyline. Of course, not every storyline has to have a Muslim lead, but we noticed, Grey's Anatomy is an example, Dr. Qadri was thrown in the background. She was wonderful, but when she was booted off the show, it didn't matter. It was irrelevant to the storyline. So to think in terms of diversity, it's a very easy thing to do, to just throw people in the background. And so this is to ask, please think more carefully about how you are including people in your stories. And the fifth is that the Muslim character is portrayed with diverse backgrounds and identities. For a very long time, Arab and Muslim identities have been co-produced, and we've seen mainly Arab characters, most of them as terrorists. So the idea here is to expand who Muslims are. We are seeing more Black Muslims portrayed. We are seeing more queer Muslims portrayed. I've never seen an Indonesian Muslim on TV. I don't know if you have, and there are 200 million Muslims in Indonesia. So our vision of who Muslims are is very narrow, and so we are encouraging expanding who Muslims are.
Yeah, I was just going to invite you into the conversation to basically, you know, I'm wondering what is the potential of this test and this filter if we apply it to its full potential?
Well, I think the test is a great example of how you move beyond performative diversity or the kind of utilitarian diversity that you talked about as happening after the Supreme Court case in the university, which I teach in my constitutional law class at USC. So it's how you move into talking about systemic change, right? So the test talks about not only what you